Hello, Rob McIver here. Let's talk about the strong aorist indicative active in the Greek New Testament and how to make it easier to understand and translate. Now, you probably know this already, but there are 5 tenses in the Greek New Testament. There is the present, the aorist, the imperfect, the future, the perfect, and the pluperfect. As you can see from this graph, which shows the number of times each one of these is found in the Greek New Testament, the present and aorist tenses are used much more frequently than the other tenses. So, once we've started with the present indicative active, it makes sense to move on to the aorist indicative active. But what is an aorist tense in Greek? Well, let's start easy and then add a little complexity. The easy answer is it's the tense that corresponds to the simple past tense in English. Well, that's not quite exactly right, but that's a good starting point, isn't it? So we know how to translate it. We will start by trying the simple past tense in English. If we look at the aspect of the aorist tense, it has a perfective aspect. And this means that the verb tend looks at the complete action, the action as a whole. As regard to type of action that is inherent in the aorist tense, it can be punctiliar, inceptive, the beginning of something, or the aorist tense can be used in proverbs and other gnomic sayings. The temporal reference is usually to the past tense. So we start with saying it's almost an equivalent to the English simple past, and then we say, well, yes, when we think about aspect, it's talking about a completed action. So that's probably how we should envisage the aorist tense. And it turns out they are not too difficult to translate. Now, there are 2 types of aorist tenses. One group are called strong aorists and another group are called weak aorists. Look, if we're being honest, the strong aorists are irregular aorists and the weak aorists are the regular aorist. And you'll be surprised, I'm starting with a strong aorist, but in fact, it's easier to begin with a strong aorist for reasons I'll explain as we go along. Now, seeing as we're talking about irregular verbs, and we're talking about the English simple past, I thought we'd look at the English verbs in their simple past and ask ourselves, well, how do we connect the simple present with the simple past? And you'll find that it's quite straightforward. Here is the set of verbs that occur frequently in the New Testament that finish with an omega when we learnt them as a vocabulary item. They just happen to be verbs that are found in the vocabularies of chapters 1 through 14 of my textbook, Beginning New Testament Greek Made Easier. But really, they are verbs that occur frequently in the New Testament. They all occur more than 50 times except for luo, and most of them occur many more times than just 50 times in the New Testament. So they're the frequently occurring one. And I've listed them here with their closest English equivalent verb. Now let's look at those English verbs. Some of them are regular and some of them are not. Let's look at the regular ones. I have here a set of regular English verbs. And let's think about how to make a simple past from the simple present. It's easiest to do it by saying today I and yesterday I. So let's start with today I ask, yesterday I asked. Yeah, you knew that. Today I believe, yesterday I believed. Today I call, yesterday I called. Now, why don't we have a bit of fun? Why don't you just pause the video here and go through and say, today I follow, yesterday I, and you sort of work out what they all are, just so that you compare your answers with mine, which you will find as soon as you restart the video. So here are the simple pasts that correspond to these English verbs that are found in the simple present. For some reason, I wanted to put the past on the left of the actual verb. So today I ask, yesterday I asked. Today I follow, yesterday I followed. Today I gather, yesterday I gathered. And as you can see, forming a simple past on a regular verb is reasonably straightforward. What you do is you add ed to it. There's a couple of almost exceptions, but I don't think they are. Let's take glorify. The past is glorified. Now it's spelt I-E-D rather than Y-E-D, but the sound is there, isn't it? And the other one like that is testify and testified. But those are the English simple past of those verbs, and they're formed regularly. There's slightly less of them than the English irregular verbs. So let's look at those next. So these English verbs are irregular. Bear, beget, behold, die, do, eat. So let's just do the same exercise. Today I bear, yesterday I bore. You knew that. Today I beget, yesterday I begot. Today I behold, yesterday I beheld. Today I die, yesterday I died. Why don't you test yourself out again? Pause the video, go through all of these verbs and say today I do, yesterday I, today I eat, yesterday I, and just go through and see what you think they are. And there they are, all the simple past that correspond to these verbs. So today I do, yesterday I did, today I eat, yesterday I ate, today I find, yesterday I found. You knew those. Those are already in your head. And so when you're translating the aorist tense into English, you don't have to think too hard. You just have to say today I, yesterday I. And you'll just know what the simple past tense is in English. So that's good news. You'll notice that there's slightly more of these than there were the regular tenses in English. And yes, the regular verbs are usually verbs that are used less often than the irregular verbs, and it's the same in Greek. So let's look at some of these strong aorists or irregular aorists. So here is a list of strong aorists that are found in the Greek New Testament. Apothenon is the strong aorist of apothnesko. Apothnesko means I die. Apothenon means I died. Ballo means I throw. Eballon means I threw. Horeo means I see. Eidon means I saw. Hey, that's irregular in English as well, so we can't blame it for being irregular in Greek because these are words that are used quite often, aren't they? Now, what's the connection between I see and I saw in English? How did you know that you went from see to saw? Well, when you were a very young person learning English, your parents corrected you, your friends corrected you, and you all learnt kind of unconsciously that the past tense of see is saw. The past tense of eat is ate, and we've got estheo, I eat, and ephagon, I ate. Now, how do you know to go from estheo to ephagon? From lego, I say, to ipon, I said. The only way is to memorize. I'm sorry. Let me say that again. The only way you're going to know this is to memorize these things. Now, being humans, we will try and find a way around this, but I have not found one. In fact, if you're trying to make it easier to understand the aorist tense, memorizing these irregular aorists is by far the one thing that you can do that will make it much easier to translate the aorist tense and understand them. Sorry about that, but that's a fact. So with these verbs and their aorists, can I ask you to overlearn this vocabulary? This is very important because this is a foundation that we will build on when we go to the infinitive mood, which has a present tense and an aorist tense. And these forms are very important for the aorist tense in the infinitive and in the subjunctive and in the participle. Well, you get the idea. So it is very, very important that you know this well. So as well as your regular learning of going from Greek to English, well, you do need the Greek to English. But as well as that, you need to go from the present indicative to the aorist indicative. So you need to know horeo, and you need to say the aorist of that is, what is it? Idon. And then you need to look at idon and say that is the aorist of horeo. So that connection needs to be very secure in your head. And I even suggest that you practice writing these out. You cover one up and you write it out. So you need both the meaning, and you probably know the meaning of horeo by now and bello by now, but you also need to know the exact spelling of the aorist tense. You need to really overlearn it. There's one little detail about the accent that you may want to notice as we look at this vocabulary. And it goes back to the rules of accents on verbs. And you may well remember there were two rules. The first rule is the accent goes as far as possible from the end of the word. Well, we don't need to worry about that. We understand that. The second rule is if the accent stands on the second to last syllable, which is long, if the last syllable is short, the accent must be circumflex. Whoa, that's a mouthful, isn't it? But it explains why there's a circumflex accent on ipon and althon and huron and idon. Now here is the paradigm of the strong aorist. You will notice that I've used elabon as the pattern word. Now you can do it by using a form of luo, which is eluon, but let me say no more than if you do so, it adds an extra level of complexity. So let's just go straight to a strong aorist, elabon, and learn how the pattern goes from elabon. It goes elabon, elabes, elaben, elabomen, elabeti, elabon. And there's another paradigm to learn, because once you've learned it and you know the vocabulary, then you know all about how to form a aorist tense of a strong aorist, an irregular verb, and you'll be able to recognize it when you meet it in the Greek New Testament. Otherwise, you look at it and say, hey, idon, what on earth's that? What verb is that? I don't know any verb called ido. Well, no, the verb is horeo, isn't it? So you need to know the connection between them. Now let's look at some examples of how the aorist tense is used. It's going to be instructive to actually compare a present indicative with an aorist indicative. So, take for example the sentence horo to teknon. I see the child. That's in the present indicative, horo. Idon to teknon is in the aorist tense, corresponding to the simple past in English. So the simple present is I see today. Yesterday I saw. So idon to teknon is I saw the child. Erkamai eis to hieron. I go into the temple. Actually, this is a bit tricky, isn't it? Because it's an omai verb. It's a middle verb, and it's the present indicative middle. But you will see that it's got an active aorist, althon. Well, isn't that interesting? So, erkamai eis to hieron. I go into the temple. And althon eis to hieron is I went into the temple. Go, went. What joins the two in English? Well, we just know that one is the past tense of the other. Just like we know, well, if you're a Greek speaker, you will know that erkamai has a past tense althon. Just does. Languages. Hey? They just do their own thing. So, ho anthropos apos neiskai. The man dies, present tense. What is it if it happened yesterday? Ho anthropos apethanin. The man died. Ortos esthei ton aton. He eats the bread, present. Ortos ephagen ton aton. He ate the bread. And as you can see, the English translation just comes to if you don't think about it too hard. So present tense, I eat. Past tense, I ate. The hard thing about aorists is learning the vocabulary. Once you know the word, you will immediately recognize it as an aorist, and it will be a simple matter to translate it. Now, there are some verbs that are made up of a preposition plus the verb. And erkamai has several examples of this. We have aperchomai, which is apo plus erchomai. We have iserchomai, is plus erchomai. Well, you get the pattern, ek plus erchomai and pros plus erchomai. So what is their aorist? Well, the erchomai part of that changes to aelthon. So aperchomai becomes ap aelthon. The omicron is a small sound, so it disappears. Iserchomai becomes isaelthon. Exerchomai becomes exaelthon. And proserchomai becomes prosaelthon. Again, once you've seen how they are formed, they kind of make sense. So let's come back to what is an aorist tense. If we are thinking of it in the simplest possible manner, we think of the Greek aorist as corresponding to the past simple tense of English. And that's going to get you by with translation. You're probably looking to understand it in a bit more depth. So we need to think of aspect. The Greek aorist has a perfective aspect. So it is talking about an action that is complete. And a complete action is usually found in the past. So it usually has a past reference. And it's viewed as a whole. So it's not an ongoing thing. There is a separate past tense called the imperfect tense, where we have continuous action. The aorist is for action that is completed in the past. Well, now that we've looked at the aorist, let's do some thinking about how to make them easier to learn and understand. And I'm sorry, the best way to make aorists easy, especially strong aorists, is to thoroughly learn them as vocabulary items and learn to go from a Greek present to a Greek aorist and from a Greek aorist to a Greek present. I suggest you cover one up and write it out from memory and look at it when you get it wrong the first time and keep doing that till you can do it, and do that for all the words in that list of aorists that I provided, or the list of aorists that you'll find in your own textbook. Number one, I almost said number two, read number one, right? That is the absolute most important thing for you to make aorists easier to understand. And it's the foundation which you're going to draw upon when you talk about the aorist in the infinitive mood and the subjunctive mood and the participial mood and the imperative mood. Very, very important to learn well. The other thing that I think helps make the aorist tense relatively straightforward is that it corresponds most closely with the simple past in English. So that would be your first way to approach a translation. You just try the English simple past. Now, it's not going to work in every case, and in that event, you're going to have to say, well, this is perfective. I understand what the Greek is saying. How do I say that in English? But most of the time, the English simple past will work as a way to translate the aorist tense. I don't want you to forget about the perfective aspect, though. That is very important, and it's going to become more important once we leave the indicative mood. And as always, the aorist tenses are going to be easier to use the more you use them in practice. If you're looking for a convenient place to find an exercise that provides lots of practice of these aorist tenses that I've shared with you, the strong aorist, or the, being honest, the irregular aorist, you will find an exercise in chapter 14 of my textbook, Beginning New Testament Greek Made Easier. In that exercise, for the first time in my textbook, I've also introduced some words and phrases from the Greek New Testament for you to look at and translate. Because when you add aorist tenses to the Greek that you know, then suddenly there are more places in the New Testament that you can translate. The aorist tense is used quite a lot, and learning it well is a very helpful start. This video is part of a series of videos on the grammar of the Greek New Testament. And there are several there that you may find interesting relating to tense and in particular the aorist tense. You can find these and other videos by clicking on the subscribe button below, and they can all be found listed on the channel New Testament Greek Made Easier. Hey, if you found this video useful, why don't you let me know by clicking on the like button below? Thank you.